around debt. And the reason why this, and I'm challenging even those who are responsible in government to speak about it clearly, because part of this communication is important. You collect revenues of around 2.4 trillion shillings. You use over 1.2 trillion in paying interest rates of debt incurred. So that's 50% that you can do nothing about. Basically what we are doing as a country, the money we are borrowing in terms of PFM Act, you should be borrowing for development alone. But even by doing the math even with a pencil, if we take our revenue collection, you remove CFS, you remove salaries, you're already in red. It means the money we borrow, some of it is for budget support, and clearly that money is for recurrent. You don't need to go very far. Just this data, just do the math around this data, even with a pencil, you'll get the correct figure. So this issue of debt, if we are not progressive enough and prudent enough as a country, in just a few months to come, we will see the ramifications. We do not want Kenya to be a case study like Sri Lanka in the year 2002, in the year 2022, 2023. The primary reason was debt. The issue around Zambia never descended too much because there was a new president who had to tell their country as it is, and they restructured, or they started or attempted to restructure. Ghana never had that luxury. They actually defaulted. Now, if you receive 2 shillings, and 1 shilling is already going into interest rates of debt incurred in terms of interest rate, and the other shilling remaining cannot pay even the recurrent expenditure, I mean, there is work to be done there. And I'm saying it so that we provoke our mind, we think, not with the aim of just talking, but also providing a solution to it. Therefore, you must have seen sometime last week, I saw the National Treasury had put up some communication which was recanted very fast about a visit to China. Visits to China currently or other bilaterals, I can assure you, will be about debt primarily. Because we are almost at a cliff in terms of debt repayment, and especially interest rate. The problem is that when you go to your creditors to discuss about either rescheduling debt or working around new terms, what are you telling the markets? When I am here, I have borrowed 3 of you some money, 10,000, 12,000, 18,000. I have your money now, so you expect me to pay you. You see, as my sister there, I've already called my brother here to tell him, you know, I was to pay you this money, but forgive me, you may have to add me a few more months for me to pay you this money. What am I already telling you? As the other person, I owe money. I've already called you as a person who owes you money. I mean, najaribu kuodoa economy kwa hii maneno mingi. Martin is here. Dirango is there. And Veronica. I owe, all of you have lent me money. Veronica 12,000, Dirago 10, and Martin 18,000. Yani, mumenikopesha. Munaelewa hiyo maneno? Niko hapa. Martin ako hapa, ameona nimeita Dirango. Nimemwambia, najua niko na pesa yako na nilikuwa nikulipe next month. Lakini sasa nataka tuongee. What comes to your mind as Veronica? Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Any talk you start around debt, changing terms, you already communicate to the markets. If you look at the figures, the yield of our Kenyan Eurobond, even as late as yesterday, you see changes there. Because markets operate on credible and fundamental information. when the market starts sensing that somebody owes you money, you're already talking to them, not asking them which bank account they should pay you through, but asking you, can we, tunaweza fanya, unipe miezi kidogo, kiasi nini. When they start seeing you already giving signals to one of your creditors that you want changes in terms, you are already communicating signals to the market. And those signals in the market is actually how countries then decide. Because what usually happens, when you give signals that you have problems with paying debt, the international market starts to sense you as somebody who may also change terms when they lend you money. So what do? They already input that risk in the interest rate they will charge you. That is why you see the yield of our Kenyan Eurobond is changing. Because when the creditors start seeing, you may start some stories sometime later in the future, they also price you accordingly. So they lend you money fine, but you also pay a commensurate cost for it. Now the other thing I want you to look at is this. You can talk to China and they agree. China, people imagine China is the #1 lender to Kenya. No, that's not true. The Kenyan debt to Kenya, the Chinese debt to Kenya is actually less than 10%. It's only that Chinese debt is usually project finance, which is more expensive, and commercial. So they become more expensive. But there are some other parameters I provoke you to go and check. Out of our CFS, payments of interest rates of 1 trillion, approximately. 750 billion this current financial year. It is now over 800 billion. The one we budgeted was 750. I think it's now hovering around 800 billion by close of the year. But let me use 750. Please get this point. 1 trillion shillings is for payment of interest rate. 750 billion is for domestic debt servicing. So, external debt, we are talking about around 200 billion shillings. There is a point I want to derive there. Now, issues around talking about debt. When I'm talking about debt, I'm talking about changing terms, because I am sure 100% we may end up there as a country. So when you talk about changing terms of debt, you may change externally. Now come back home. 750 billion is the biggest ticket of payment of interest rate in our country, in our economy. Now, can you start thinking as a Kenyan what that is? Can you imagine a meeting being called by the National Treasury at some point? Like the way we are here, there is a meeting that has been convened. Nimewaita tuongee mambo ya hii deni. Sio kama wa Kenya, lakini wale watu wamekopesha serikali pesa. I want you to start seeing that conversation, what it means. The 750 billion Kenya shillings we are paying domestic interest rate is owed to who? Is owed to banks, is owed to insurance companies, is owed to bond holders, even normal Kenyans. Now, changing terms means what? Are you calling us to increase the yield? What is the likely conversation that is likely to be around there? It's about postponing paying you. That's number one. There can only be two things actually. Postponing paying you, that's number one, or paying you less. Now think about it this way. You are a bank with shareholders expecting you to release results by end of the financial year. Huyo mtu anasema nini akikuita hiyo mkutano, in other words?